All right.
Because the mic's right there.
So let's talk about the human nervous system. So when we talk about the human nervous system, we break it into sort of two categories: the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Okay? So the central nervous system is includes the brain and the spinal cord. So obviously these are vital parts of the nervous system. Okay? And the brain itself, it's basically a mass of neurons. It's protected by your cranium. It has some membranes, the meninges, that sort of wrap around the brain. These membranes have fluid between them, sort of help cushion the brain. That fluid's called cerebrospinal fluid. It's a fluid that's found in the spinal cord and the spinal column. It's found in the brain. Is anyone familiar with a disease when an infection can cause swelling within these meninges? And I think, well, probably not. Maybe in 6th grade you may have been vaccinated against it. You will before you go to college as well.
Isn't it Tdap or something?
No? Nicola?
My grandfather had something go wrong in his brain and all the fluid turned yellow and it swelled up.
Oh, well, this is a swelling of those fluids, so it could be meningitis is the term. So if you ever heard of meningitis, it's when sometimes an infection causes swelling in those tissues, puts pressure on the brain. But the human brain has many different parts. You know, 3 what we call main parts of the human brain are the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the medulla. Okay. In different types of vertebrates, the different parts of the brain are different sizes depending on how advanced the nervous system is of that animal. In humans, the cerebrum is very large, very complex, by far the largest part of the brain. And the cerebrum is the part of the brain that is the center for basically our voluntary activities, processing sensory inputs like sight and smell and touch and taste, memory, intelligence, emotion, speaking, thinking, learning, sort of all those sort of activities are all coordinated in the cerebrum. So it should make sense why that's one of them. It is the largest part of the human brain because those things are very important. And you know, it looks like this. It's a very convoluted structure with all these curves and very complex structure. The brain, the cerebrum is 2 hemispheres. There's a right side and a left side. They are connected to each other with tissue that sort of brings information from one side to the other. And different parts of that cerebrum, and we'll look at this in the next slide, are responsible for different functions. Damage to one part of the cerebrum can impair very specific functions. And this is how, for a long time, scientists learned about what different parts of the brain do by studying people with brain injuries. And by studying people that had a very localized injury to one specific part of their brain, they can then look at what functions in that person were affected, and that allowed them to start to identify, okay, this section of the brain is responsible for speech. This part of the brain is responsible for memory and so forth. And so they're able to do that. Nowadays, we have more technological means of doing that. We have fMRI, which is functional MRI. An MRI is basically a way to get an image of soft tissue in the body. Sort of like an X-ray, but X-rays only show hard tissue like bones. MRIs can show the soft tissue of the body. And what they do is they have special MRI machines which they look at a person's brain and they can see which parts of the brain are most active, and then they ask people to do certain things, memorize things, sing a song, play music, talk. And then they look at what parts of the brain are most active as people are doing these activities, and that helps them identify sort of where, what different parts of the brain are doing. So let's pass around here. This is sheep brain, okay? And this is a cow's spinal cord. You just see the structure of them. So that's the cerebrum, okay? The cerebellum, okay, is this back part, sometimes called the hindbrain. Okay, when you look at this sheep brain, you can see it sort of towards the back of the brain here. And that is responsible for sort of coordinating motor activity, movement, maintaining balance. And then there's the very base portion of the brain, sometimes called the brain stem, the medulla oblongata. And this is this portion of the brain that connects to the spinal cord. And the medulla is responsible for the most basic life-sustaining activities. Things like regulating blood pressure and heart rate, breathing, coughing, blinking. Those sort of most basic functions that keep us alive are controlled by the medulla, by the brainstem. That's why, you may have heard the term before, sometimes if people are very sick, they may still be alive, but people might say they're brain dead. What that means is that the parts of their brain, like the cerebrum, are no longer active, but they are still alive and still breathing, and their heart is still pumping, because their medulla is still active. If you ever heard about a chicken, I know this is in your lab, a chicken running around after their head's cut off. There's a chicken in the 1940s that lived for 14 years after its head was cut off. The medulla portion of a chicken's brain is deeper inside of its neck, so actually you could sever the cerebrum of that chicken, but the life-sustaining parts of that central nervous system are still active and still able to maintain basic life functions, even though there's no active activity in the cerebrum.
It's not the answer to
How did the chicken starve?
They gave it food through a little dropper into its esophagus.
It must have loved that.
Couldn't feel it had no cerebrum. If you look at some pictures here, this shows the brains of various animals and so forth. Okay. As you see here, we see a cross section of the human brain. You see the cerebrum. There are ventricles, areas, gaps in the middle of the brain that are filled with fluid. There are also endocrine glands located in the brain, the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, and so forth. Back here, you see the cerebellum, and then deep within inside the medulla, the brain stem, which then attaches to the spinal cord. So those are the various parts of the brain. Like we said, it's been identified what parts of the brain are in control of various activities. And you can see, you don't need to memorize any of these or anything, but you can see sort of that location and motivation and movement, vision, language, smell, emotions, and so forth. And you can see sort of what areas of the brain are responsible for that. Okay?
Is that afraid of it?
You can hold it for a minute.
Wait, do you order those online?
It's
Yeah.
just a spinal cord.
It's just a spinal cord, guys.
So, the central nervous system is composed of the brain and then the spinal cord. So the spinal cord attaches to the base of the brain, to the brain stem, to the medulla, then travels down and goes through each vertebrae that make up your spine. Your spinal cord is protected there. And then branching off from your spinal cord are the peripheral nervous system. Are nerves that then bring nerve impulses back and forth to the rest of our body. So your spinal cord goes just down your spine, and then branching off are these other nerves, the parts of your peripheral nervous system. Okay. And so when you look at the nervous system, so we have, again, the brain and the spinal cord are the central nervous system. All the other parts are the peripheral nervous system. We have various nerves, and they're classified sort of by where they originate along the spine. Okay? We have cranial nerves. There's 12 pairs of cranial nerves that originate directly from the brain. Okay? Then there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves that go as our spinal cord travels down our vertebrae. These spinal nerves branch off at each vertebrae. Okay? They're split into categories. The cervical nerves are the topmost nerves that exit your spinal cord way up high in your neck. Then, sort of in your back area, the thoracic nerves, which exit your spinal cord in this area. Okay, they lead to your chest muscles, your abdomen. Okay? Then you have the lumbar nerves, lower down in sort of your lower back. Those nerves branch off and lead down into your legs. Okay? And then a few sacral nerves, which are just below around the tailbone. And each of those nerves are carrying neurological information back and forth from your spinal cord and out, and also from your other parts of your body and back into the spinal cord to be processed by the brain. We split those nerves into two categories. Somatic nerves are the nerves that are responsible for voluntary control. They connect to muscles that we use voluntarily. They connect to the cerebrum. Where the autonomic nerves are the nerves that control involuntary responses. They're generally controlled by other parts of the brain, by the cerebellum, by the medulla, things that control smooth muscle in our digestive system, in our arteries, our cardiac muscle, which allows our heart to beat, endocrine glands, and so forth. So those are the two parts of our nervous system. Central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, and then the peripheral nervous system, which are all the other parts. We'll continue on with that. I have to give you your take-home quiz before you leave.